Okay, so we're doing this over again. Turns out, should keep your OS and applications up to date, boys and girls. So it seems, and I'll just go ahead and show this because, you know, what are failures for if not to learn from them? This update thing is the Xcode, and I'm not even going to open that because that is like a 6 gig download, and yeah. I would have thought that this was, come to figure, the screen totally crashed. I'm going to post the first part, but it went pink and then purple, and I was like, I've never seen a Mac do that without actually having someone want to do it intentionally. But it tells me Mojave. Actually, let's see. If there's anything of interest or value, maybe I'll blank it out, but maybe it isn't. You know what? I'm not sure what this machine is doing. Yeah, because it says macOS Mojave. And well, this is going all over the place. Okay, maybe I don't want to update it. Well, let's just cancel that. Well, either way, the updates, so I won't do 10.14, but let's get to, so the Safari, these updates here completely wrecked my system, wrecked this mini, and had to restart it a couple of times. But this is still going, and it's been going, if anyone's actually following the date and time on my system, I actually had to go to a meeting, but as I came back, this was still waiting. So, be interesting to see. Maybe this is going to crash all over again, or stop working. I know Macs don't crash, they just stop working. Or fail to cooperate. Okay, so the previous issue from the previous video, as I mentioned, I actually have Brew installed on here, and I did have Syncthing set up. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and install this all over again. So this is going to be kind of lessons learned from the previous video. It's going to install it, and at one point I'm going to pause because I do have a previous installation that I need to go and destroy the data. There's nothing really of huge value. It's just I was testing this out with the Brew to see how well it would work. It's Homebrew. I keep saying Brew, but because that's the command in the terminal, but Homebrew that you can install. I may or may not do a video on that, but maybe it'll be of interest if anyone wants to see that. And it's because, right, macOS is a BSD system, right? They take from the BSD kernel, and there are essentially ways to get quote-unquote Unix systems up and running. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Now let me go find it on the launcher. Yeah. As you can tell, I only really use this to develop software on. It's not really my daily driver, so. And come on. It's making me look bad. Oh, that's right. And show me. Not new folder. Wow, maybe I'll just stop here and how about I just go to icons? Oh, yeah, there we go. Icons are good. Perfect. Let me just do this the Mac way. Just click on a bunch of icons. Alright, so let's get back to applications. Syncthing here. Double click that. And it should pop up here on the tray. And it says it's running offline. So what I'm going to do, because this system has a previous configuration, I'm going to pause the video here and destroy the previous installation that I have and restart it. And you know what, actually, maybe I don't do that. What about, maybe this will help for those that are interested in, now, is there a show hidden? So here's the Syncthing folder that I have. You know what? I'm just going to keep going with this. and show people. Hide toolbar. This is going to get rambling, so I don't blame anyone if they give it a thumbs down. I'm not going to ask for thumbs down, thumbs up. I figure people will express their opinions of, yeah, dude, that's kind of junk, and they'll say it. Or they'll let me know in the comments, as previous people have before. Xcode button font, yeah, let's see. You know what, I'm going to pause this, so that way it doesn't get completely rambly. And I'll be back in a second. Alright, we're back. Okay, turns out, did a quick search on my other machine. Actually, recording this on a, whoops. I was watching that movie while I was thinking, but don't want to get dinged for that. For the audio. Recording on, I'm doing OBS on Windows, streaming through. I'll do a video at some point on the setup, but to keep from getting too sidetracked, apparently macOS doesn't want you to see or view the hidden folders whatsoever. So I had to go to the terminal. Yes, I know my icon's here. As I mentioned earlier, some of my terminal stuff's a little messed up in macOS, but long story short, I need to destroy this folder. So there's this tilde for those that have never touched the terminal in macOS. The little tilde sign here, symbol, it means your home directory for the user. So my name's Antonio, and then that's my account. So it's my home directory, as you can see here, represented via this. But the next folder here is library. So that seems to be hidden from this folder here. There's also other what are called hidden files or dot files, typically in Linux, and I'll just do if anyone wants to look away, they don't have to, right? They don't have to pay attention right now, but I'll just do, and then at some point I'll do that command and explain things later. But as you can see, there's the .bash, .sessions, .config, .cups, and those dot files don't show up at all. The only thing that shows up here is the synergy config that I have, which, if I scroll down, is this one here. So all these dot files, these are hidden systems, apparently, or hidden files, which are these here, and hidden directories, the D here in the front. But there, you can also see there's a color change, but color change isn't always perfect, which is why these permissions and here state, directory, then it's user. I won't go into that. It's maybe if you viewed in the video in the future, but long story short, yet again, I need to destroy this Syncthing folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back out with a directory and then remove recursively by force, and this is always something you have to be extremely careful with. This is essentially, so I'm going to trash both of these. The macOS, this one's the bundle, this is the one from the homebrew install. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to intentionally, before I do that, close that so as not to trash anything in the process or get it into some kind of funky state. This is essentially the God command, if you want to call it that, in Linux. You always want to be careful. In Linux, Unix, any terminal, any non-Windows system, since, as I mentioned previously, macOS has some heritage in Unix, and then I'm also going to trash this one. So now the hope is, which I'm doing this essentially on the fly, is that it will recover properly and recreate that folder. So let's go back to our Launchpad, to the application, launch it, and I'm just going to do an ls, which is list directory, and I should see something get created. They created both of those. Okay, not sure exactly what's going on with that, but there are the commands here and proof that I destroyed them previously. And as you saw, or anyone that was paying attention, this sync here is the default folder that Syncthing creates. So you can go with that, you can delete it, but before you delete it, you will want to make sure you change that. So I'm going to click open, and then previously I had a password because this was, as I mentioned, a previous install that I had via Homebrew. Now here is what you'll see: the default folder, and it asks you, do you want to allow anonymous usage reporting? You could say yes, you could say no. I'm going to say no. And okay, so now here it wants to automatically upgrade, even though as for those of you who saw, or here you see here in the window, what I downloaded was the 1449-1 DMG, and now it's telling me it wants to automatically upgrade. So when you do see that, you want to make sure you have the automatic upgrade. For the most part, it's never really an issue. There are some rare instances that the automatic upgrades may have some incompatibility between versions, but that's not been the case since a very long time. Previously, there was issues and the automatic upgrades would not occur if there was an issue, but for the most part, you're usually safe, especially if you have all macOS devices, or if you're all on Windows devices. You can be fairly certain. It's when you start mixing across various platforms, and then that you can run into that issue, but that won't be the case with us, because as I mentioned here, this is just a quick, this is how you install it. If you need to add a device, what you'll do here is add remote device, and it's going to ask you, so here are a bunch of, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these because I don't want anybody adding my devices, but as you can tell, if you have any devices on the network, they will show up here because it scans your local network. You will have to add this really long number in this device ID, and that can be kind of a pain. It's best to copy and paste. Much easier. The phone applications have a QR code, and I don't see, there's no way to which make it ridiculously easy to, you essentially scan it with the phone's camera and then it adds it, and you're often sharing. But for the desktops, it's best to copy and paste this. And what I mean by copy and paste this is, if you go to Actions and Show ID, this is that number you're going to have to copy. It is ridiculously long. This number won't be active. I will have changed this. Okay, so it looks like you cannot, there's no simple way of recreating or generating a new device ID. If at some point that is no longer the case, or if I actually find something like that, I was looking through some of the, essentially the GitHub, and it doesn't seem to be that there's an easy way, because these are essentially big certificates, and if I'm reading this correctly, the device ID is a hash of that. Not exactly sure how I understand how it's public key generation, but the ID is built off of that. So it's essentially, you have to regenerate the keys, and it's like based or encoding. It's some kind of hash. I'll have to double check. Well, I mean, I'm not going to send or push any commits or anything, or issue any bug requests, but essentially you would have to regenerate everything. So the quick and simple way to do that is, as I mentioned, as I did earlier in the first part, was I essentially just trashed these two folders and forced on the restart of Syncthing that it will recreate them. So let's just run that experiment. So let's take the ID, and we won't have to copy all of it. Okay, let's copy all of it. Come on. We will copy it, and too lazy to open anything up, so I'll just dump it here in the browser window for Brave. I may actually do a review or just a using Brave. There are a couple of it's a cool browser, and there are a couple of things that you may or may not see or come across when using Brave, but that will come out sometime in the future. It's a nice browser, but it does move in terms of the features they add, so if I do that, I will try to do it as quickly as possible, time allowing. So I'm going to close that window and shut this down. remove those directories. What I'm doing here is pressing just the arrow up key, and I'm going to use the wildcard. So as I mentioned earlier, this is essentially rm-rf is, with great power is great responsibility. You will destroy a lot of stuff. And talking from experience, I have deleted things that only a backup has saved me from hours and hours of having to recreate it. So use rm-rf with great caution. So let's go back to our Launchpad, bring up Syncthing, and we should see a whole new set of, well, should at least see a new device key, or device ID, not device key. Let me bring this up, and let's see if this is going to make me a liar. And so, nope. So it looks like it's restarting everything, so do I want anonymous usage reporting? Sure, why not? Because I'm going to eventually trash this, because I'm going to show my device ID again, and that you don't want to share, because you'll have to essentially, when you add a device, and I'll do this in a follow-up with, this is just more of an install. I'm kind of getting started. Minus the adding a second device, you'll have to add a key, and then when you add it, there's going to be a request that shows up. But see, the device ID here is now different from the one that I pasted here on the address bar. So surefire way to regenerate or to create a new identifier is to destroy the preferences. I know people aren't, especially people who use macOS, aren't typically accustomed to using the terminal. Having many friends who actually run macOS and having to essentially do any kind of terminal editing for them in their presence, obviously. But so that's a surefire way to recreate a device ID. If it changes anytime soon or in the future, if there becomes a command line option to do that, I will cover it. But for now, if somehow or some reason your device ID gets leaked, somebody inadvertently uses it, or say that you're showing this and someone snaps a picture of your shoulder, you can destroy or trash your settings folders here, both of these, the Syncthing and Syncthing macOS, and it will restart from scratch. So that's pretty much a very, very quick install, setup, and long-winded. Here are things you can add in terms of getting started. The API generator is kind of cool. This will just generate, but it doesn't actually mess with the device ID. I can save that. And if you're following the video, this is still the new device ID. It hasn't actually generated. So making changes to your API key will not affect the device ID. I will do a follow-up for adding devices to this. Essentially what you want to do is you click this, as I mentioned here. These you won't be able to see, but they'll be blanked out, or I'll have covered them. If you click on it, it will autofill this, and you hit save, and then you can start adding it. That's a quick way of doing it. And then you'll see on the opposite end of the, let me go back to where, see here, so as I added it and you saw that, it'll say show QR code. So it'll, instead of having to go window back, you can actually show the QR code of this device, so not of yours. So you can't easily do that. So say you had a phone and you're like, oh, this long device ID is, I don't know how you would know or have that memorized, but this is cool to show this QR code. But unless you're like, oh yeah, this is, my Note 9 or my Note 8. But yeah, it's it's kind of cool to have that there, but I'm not exactly sure why. But you can also do device name. This one I haven't used. It's usually, I almost always use the QR codes because it's between two portable devices, and the desktops, or, I don't really have these. I essentially know all of these. There really isn't anything hanging on the network that's unidentifiable because I separate my tablets and my phone from the actual desktops and laptops. So they run on two separate wireless networks. But anyways, that's a long digression. I can click on these, hit save. On the other end, or on the other device, you'll see a bar up here that'll say authorize, add, and then you can start sharing. As I previously mentioned, here's the sync, and you can start and sharing, dumping folders there. You can also change this if you don't like that capital S, if for some reason you have something against it, or it's just not the way you store files. You can change that path. So hopefully this was of use to someone. If not, and for anyone that's still listening or watching, thanks for staying on this far. And all right, I will see everyone in the next video.